Have you ever wondered how a sleepy agricultural valley in California became the epicenter of the digital world? We see the flashy headquarters, hear about the billionaire founders, and use the products every single day. But this global powerhouse wasn't built overnight. The story of Silicon Valley is a sprawling saga of ambition, innovation, and accidental genius. It's a story that starts not with a hoodie-wearing coder, but in the tense, high-stakes atmosphere of the Cold War. So, let's rewind the clock and uncover how this small patch of land transformed humanity. Our story begins in the 1950s, a time defined by the Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. The government was pouring massive amounts of money into defense and aerospace technology, desperate for a military edge. This federal funding became the seed money for a new kind of industry. At the heart of it was Stanford University, led by a visionary provost named Frederick Terman. Terman believed that the university and private industry should work hand in hand. He created the Stanford Industrial Park, leasing university land to high-tech companies. This wasn't just a real estate deal. It was a radical idea that created a symbiotic ecosystem. Brilliant graduates no longer had to move to the East Coast for top jobs. They could stay right here, starting their own companies and collaborating with their former professors. Early tenants like Varian Associates and Hewlett-Packard, founded in a garage by two Stanford grads, set the stage for everything that followed. The military needed smaller, more reliable electronics for its missiles and spy planes, and this region was ready to deliver. The real spark, however, came from a man who was brilliant, difficult, and absolutely essential to this story. William Shockley, a Nobel Prize winner for co-inventing the transistor at Bell Labs. Shockley decided to set up his own semiconductor company back in his hometown of Palo Alto. He was a magnet for talent, recruiting the brightest young minds in the country to work on a new kind of transistor made from silicon, a cheap and abundant material, instead of the fragile germanium used at the time. Shockley was a genius at physics, but a terrible manager. His paranoid and abrasive style drove his top employees to their breaking point. In 1957, 8 of his most brilliant researchers, who would later be famously dubbed the Traitorous Eight, decided they had had enough. They left Shockley to start their own company. This act of betrayal was the single most important event in Silicon Valley's early history. The Traitorous Eight, including future legends like Robert Noyce and Gordon Moore, founded Fairchild Semiconductor. Fairchild wasn't just another company, it was a revolutionary force. Here, Robert Noyce co-invented the integrated circuit, a tiny silicon chip that could hold multiple transistors. This was the breakthrough that would make modern electronics possible. More importantly, Fairchild created the culture that would define Silicon Valley. It was fast-paced, meritocratic, and had a high tolerance for risk. But the story doesn't end there. The talent at Fairchild was too ambitious to stay in one place. Over the next decade, employees left to start their own ventures, creating a family tree of companies that became known as Fairchild. These spin-offs, including Intel and AMD, would go on to dominate the semiconductor industry, turning the Santa Clara Valley into the one and only Silicon Valley. The invention of the integrated circuit at Fairchild set the stage for the next great revolution. Gordon Moore, one of the Fairchild founders, made a stunning prediction in 1965, which we now know as Moore's Law. He observed that the number of transistors on a chip was doubling roughly every 2 years, and he predicted this trend would continue. This meant that computers would become exponentially more powerful and cheaper over time. This wasn't just an academic observation. It was a business plan for the entire industry. It fueled a relentless drive to innovate, and in 1971, another Fairchild spin-off, Intel, took the next logical step. They created the microprocessor, the entire central processing unit of a computer on a single chip. This was the brain that was waiting for a body. The microprocessor made the personal computer possible. Before this, computers were giant, expensive machines that filled entire rooms, owned only by governments and large corporations. Now, the power of computing could, in theory, belong to anyone. This idea captured the imagination of a new generation of hobbyists and tinkerers, many of whom were part of the counterculture movement of the 60s and 70s. They saw computers not as tools of corporate control, but as instruments of personal liberation. In places like the Homebrew Computer Club, enthusiasts like Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs gathered to share ideas and show off their creations. It was in this environment of collaborative, anti-establishment passion that the Apple I and then the revolutionary Apple II were born. Companies like Apple and Microsoft, founded by Bill Gates and Paul Allen, didn't just sell machines. They sold a vision of a future where technology empowered the individual. The PC revolution had begun, and it was happening right here in Silicon Valley. By the early 1990s, the personal computer was becoming a fixture in homes and offices, but the next seismic shift was already underway. Its roots, once again, lay in a government, Project ARPANET, a decentralized communication network designed to survive a nuclear attack. For decades, this network of networks was the exclusive domain of academics but as it evolved into the internet and the World Wide Web was invented, entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley saw its commercial potential. The launch of the Mosaic web browser in 1993, which later became Netscape, was the turning point. For the first time, anyone could navigate the internet with a simple, graphical interface. It was like going from a text-based command line to a vibrant, clickable world. An explosion of creativity followed. Companies like Yahoo, Amazon, and eBay were founded, creating new ways to find information, shop, and connect with others. This period became known as the dot-com boom. It was a time of wild optimism and even wilder speculation. Venture capitalists poured billions of dollars into any startup with a "com" in its name, often with little regard for a viable business plan. Stock prices soared to astronomical heights. It felt like a new gold rush. Stories of instant millionaires were everywhere, but the party couldn't last forever. In the year 2000, the bubble burst. The Nasdaq index crashed, and hundreds of dot-com companies went bankrupt almost overnight. It was a brutal correction that wiped out fortunes and seemed to signal the end of the internet dream. For a moment, it looked like the Valley's incredible run was over. But beneath the surface of the crash, the foundations for the next era were already being laid. The boom had built out the essential infrastructure, the fiber optic cables, the data centers, and, most importantly, a generation of experienced engineers and entrepreneurs who had learned some very hard lessons. The recovery from the dot-com bust was slow, but a new model for the internet began to emerge. This new phase was dubbed Web 2.0. The focus shifted from simply broadcasting information to creating platforms that allowed users to generate and share their own content. It was about participation, collaboration, and community. This is the era that gave us the tools we use every single day. The rise of social media platforms, born in Silicon Valley, fundamentally changed how we communicate. Facebook, which started as a college network, grew into a global behemoth, connecting billions of people. YouTube transformed how we consume and create video. Twitter created a real-time public square for news and conversation. And then, in 2007, Apple unveiled the iPhone. This wasn't just a new phone. It was a powerful, internet-connected computer that fit in your pocket. The iPhone and the App Store it created unleashed a tidal wave of innovation, launching entirely new industries like the gig economy with companies like Uber and Airbnb. Technology was no longer something you sat down to use at a desk. It was woven into the very fabric of our lives, always on and always with us. And that brings us to today. The small cluster of defense contractors and semiconductor firms has morphed into a global force that shapes economies, politics, and culture. The innovations born in Silicon Valley have brought incredible benefits. Instant access to information, connection with loved ones across the globe, and tools that have revolutionized medicine, science, and education. We carry supercomputers in our pockets that are millions of times more powerful than the machines that sent astronauts to the moon. But this incredible power has also brought complex challenges that we are only now beginning to grapple with. Questions about privacy, data security, and the spread of misinformation have become urgent global concerns. The move fast and break things ethos that fueled so much growth now faces scrutiny for its unintended social consequences. The wealth generated here has also created staggering inequality, making the region one of the most expensive places to live in the world and pushing out many of the very people who help it run. The story of Silicon Valley is not over. It's constantly being written. New frontiers, like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and clean energy, are the focus of today's innovators. The region continues to be a magnet for the world's brightest and most ambitious minds, all hoping to build the next big thing. But the story of Silicon Valley is more than just a history of technology. It's a human story about the power of ideas, the allure of ambition, and the unforeseen consequences of our own creations. From the Cold War to the social media age, it's a journey that has fundamentally reshaped our world, for better and for worse. Understanding this history is essential to navigating the future that Silicon Valley is building for all of us right now. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think will be the next chapter in this incredible story? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through tech history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more videos.